Come, senators, congressmen, please heed the call. Please don't stand in the doorway, don't block up the halls. For he who gets hurt will be he who has stalled. There's a battle outside and it's raging. It'll soon shake your windows and rattle your walls. For the times they are changing. Yes, they are. Come, mothers and fathers throughout this land, criticize what you can't understand. Oh, your sons and your daughters are beyond your command. Your old road is rapidly aging. Please get out of the new one if you can. Lend your hand for the times they are a-changing. The line is crossed and the curse it is cast. All the slow and now will later be fast, as the present now will later be past. The old order rapidly fading, and the first one now will later be last. Oh, the times they are a-changing. Yeah, the times they are a-changing.
Thank you, Jared. Woo. That is quite a song. The line has been crossed. The order is rapidly fading, and the times they are a-changin'. And still, there is no justice. That's the truth of the matter that I have to say to you this morning. There is no justice. Thank God that the times, they are always a-changing, because there is no justice. You only had to scan the headlines this morning. That's all I had time to do, scan the headlines and read. Working class people, including many of our friends, are dying of despair. Already burned regions of Australia are expecting fire again. The color line still seems in place in the NFL. There is no justice, only injustice, globally and locally. You, our members, know this even better than I, especially, perhaps, those of you who serve on our justice teams. There was a teenager at Monroe Middle School. His teacher reached out to our Partners in Education team for help for him, for this young man. He and his family were so poor, and his shoes were so small. Because his shoes were too small, he was having trouble walking, and his teacher had noticed. He had big feet, size 14. So Nancy McDonald took him to Fleet Feet. When they took off his socks, they saw that his toes had turned under and the skin had grown together. So his toes had become like a web. Nancy and others raised funds, helped him get the surgery he needed and the size 14 shoes he needed, then helped him find a job where he still works to this day. It's not easy to listen to that story It's uncomfortable, and it hurts. Often, we don't know what to do with those hurt feelings. More and more people tell me they can't even read the news. It's too disheartening. There are lots of Facebook posts, like this one from my friend Corinne back in Maine, which I noticed this week, trying to balance staying informed and staying sane. Yes. What are we supposed to do? There is no justice. There is only injustice. And the only proper response to injustice is outrage, wrote Abraham Joshua Heschel, the great Jewish scholar. It's the point of view of the prophets, from Micah and Ezekiel to Jeremiah and Isaiah. The only proper response to injustice is outrage. Prophets who proclaim that the radical tension in the world and our religious dilemma is not between justice and injustice, is not between the flesh and the spirit, or between good and evil, despite what Star Wars and Marvel Comics and social media would have us imagine. The prophets then and now proclaim that the critical tension in our lives is between injustice and apathy. I imagine we all agree that our justice team volunteers here at All Souls are working on our behalf within the larger community for justice, and that they, like all of us, first have to overcome their own apathy toward injustice. Because especially in this tradition, in our liberal religious tradition, we don't claim to be able to see through God's eyes or proclaim God's absolute truths. We simply try to understand our lives and the lives of others. We try to understand cause and effect and to balance the rights of the individual with the well-being of society as a whole. We read, we watch documentaries, we invite experts to make presentations at Day Alliance, we volunteer in the schools, we fight to preserve the prairie, we sing in the prisons. Not because we know what justice is, but because we feel. Because we feel our own and each other's suffering. We can never underestimate the power of our feelings. To be apathetic is to be without feeling. To feel is to have pathos, which is the root of the word compassion and sympathy and empathy. To be numb is to be so overwhelmed with feeling that we shut down. So, as my friend so wisely said, we each have to find our own ways to balance staying informed and staying sane. Because we won't ever escape the four truths of the prophet. There is no justice. There is only injustice. The proper response to injustice is outrage. The critical tension in our lives is not between good and evil, the flesh and the spirit, but between injustice and apathy, which I translate as, we will cry, we may rage, then we must engage. We will cry, we may rage, and then we must engage. Lisa Schatz has been a teacher for 20 years and is a member here at All Souls. Over the years of her teaching career, she has chosen to stay in her underserved public elementary school. About 2 years ago, Lisa started a nonprofit called Gaining Ground. She raised funds to create a bookmobile, bringing books to children and families who otherwise wouldn't have access, especially in the summer months. The bookmobile is a traveling library, and when it arrives in your neighborhood, you are invited to come aboard. And when a child asks, "How many books can I take?" the answer is always, "However many books you can read in a week." Recently, an 8-year-old boy in an after-school program was in emotional turmoil and threatening to kill himself. An 8-year-old boy. Lisa worked with the mother who had recently been diagnosed with HIV, and she helped the mother get some support during her son's stay in the hospital. When the boy came home from the hospital, he mentioned to Lisa that they weren't having Christmas this year. Lisa also knows his older sister, a bright and articulate student, she says, at Monroe. With the help of many people, including the assistant principal at Monroe, the family had enough food for the holidays, a Christmas tree with all the trimmings and presents for everyone. There is no justice. There is only injustice. We will cry, we may rage, then we must engage. Which is why we are talking about getting out the vote drives and democracy this morning, even though our theme is saving creation this month. On January 1st, my husband Rick and I started driving back from Oregon, where my daughter and son-in-law and many cousins live. Over the holidays, I read Where the Crawdads Sing, cover to cover. Have any of you read that? It's a beautiful book imbued with the magic and power of wild places. So driving across our western wilderness, stopping at the Petrified National Park, where we saw trees that have turned to quartz stone over the passing of 1 trillion years, I started to imagine a sermon in my head about the power and purpose of wild places and spaces to honor creation and the natural world, our theme for the month. We drove through the 1st and then the 2nd and then the 3rd of January, and the fact that 2020 is an election year suddenly struck me. And I thought, if we're getting serious about saving creation, we better get serious about getting out the vote. I won't bore you with all the headlines this morning. Another truth be told, I have to watch Floretta's face while I share this one. I have not always voted in every election I could have over the course of my lifetime. Before you judge me too harshly, here are some of the most common reasons people say they don't vote. Younger people say they are too busy to be bothered and feel they have no stake in the outcome. Older people say the same two things. Many of us feel we don't know enough about the issues and or the candidates. Some of us can't get away from work to get to the polls and don't know that we can vote by mail. Did you know that you can get the ballot early and have time to research the issues and the candidates? That would help me if I would take the time to do it. I learned a lot of this talking to Floretta Reed years ago when Flo connected with our beloved Sheila Swearingen, who was then the president of the League of Women Voters. It was clear to both women that a citywide coalition of organizations was necessary to get everybody involved in voting in local and national elections. So, Flo and Sheila created Voting is Power, a nonprofit designed to do just that. I asked Flo why she was so passionate about voting. Here's some of what I learned. Flo was raised right here in Oklahoma. Her mom was born in 1910, and her dad was born in 1907. Her grandparents never had the right to vote. Her parents came of age in the 30s and could vote or not, depending on the mood of the white person at the voting station that day. Her mom had finished high school and had an easier time of it than many because she could pass the test they gave her before they allowed her to vote. Her dad usually had the money for the poll tax, so he also voted. Of course, no white people had to take a test or pay a poll tax. Flo's parents, Herman and Mintha Kirby, told Flo all her life, if you ever get the right to vote, you exercise it. Flo marched for her own voting rights in college in the 60s. She voted for the first time when she was 22 years old and hasn't missed an election since. Not one, not a school board election, city council election, sheriff's election, state referendum, congressional or presidential election. Yeah, that's a... It's a treasure, she told me. It's your voice. And each and every voice counts in a democracy. These elections are so close these days, she said, one vote can definitely make a difference. Your voice matters, she said, and not exercising that right is, I don't want to judge, she said, but I just think it's so important to exercise that right. I asked her about the Electoral College, and she continued, if you're feeling cynical about the Electoral College, we have to get the right people in office to change it. We need 63 2/3 of Congress to vote to change it. We need 63 2/3 of the states to ratify the change. It won't happen fast, so we have to stay engaged to make it happen. At its peak, after getting some funding from the U.A, and I will tell you there are definitely still grants available from the U.A for this kind of work, Voting is Power made toolkits like these bags. Inside this bag is everything you need, not only to get yourself registered, but to register other people. Just imagine what might happen in this city if more of us followed Flo's lead. Last Memorial Day, at a family reunion of all things, and I told this story to the Fox News this morning, so watch the news later tonight, Flo noticed many younger cousins were there, and she asked one if he had registered to vote, and when he said no, Flo set up a table, put a cloth on top of it, and started registering people to vote at her family reunion. Why not set up a table at football games or in front of your yoga studio? All you need is a table, a sign, pens and pencils, she challenged me. So now I'm challenging you. Come gather around people wherever you roam and admit that the waters around you have grown and accept it that soon you'll be drenched to the bone. If your time to you is worth saving, then you better start swimming or sink like a stone, for the times they are a-changin'. The best way not to sink like a stone, as Dylan sings, is to start swimming, is to get engaged. Deanna Terrell got engaged with a teacher walkout a couple of years ago. Her district offered buses for teachers to ride together to the Capitol. And on the first Monday of the walkout, the ride over was filled with talk of, now, who's my representative? And who's my senator? And what do we say to them when we see them? Upon arriving at the Capitol, many teachers were surprised and frustrated to discover the legislators were less than welcoming. They were told, you need an appointment to speak to him, or the office is closed this morning, miss. They experienced eye rolls and clock watching as they shared their stories. But by the second week of the walkout, things had changed. The bus ride over was filled with constituents, not just teachers, women and men, although 90% women, making appointments on their phones, discussing legislation that had been addressed the week before, assessing how their representatives and senators had voted, teacher constituents now sharing talking points and strategizing about how to reach the most and most important legislators. Come, senators, congressmen, please heed the call. Don't stand in the doorway, don't block up the hall, for he that gets hurt will be he who has stalled. The battle outside raging will soon shake your windows and rattle your walls, for the times, they are a-changin'. Thank God the times are a-changin'. We know our democracy is imperfect. We know that in 2015, mark that date, before the last election, our democracy was downgraded from a full to a flawed democracy. We know that we rank 21st in the world in the Economist's Index of Democracies. Yet, as imperfect as it is, our democracy is the social and political expression of the religious principle that all people are brothers and sisters, that on this earth we are part of one human family, unrestricted by nation, race, or creed. Our democracy must be a-changin until we have repaired its greatest moral failing, the exclusion of so many others. Our democracy needs you. If this is our basic faith, that on this earth we are part of one human family, unrestricted by nation, race, or creed, and this is my basic faith, and if we are willing to reject beliefs of every kind that contradict or limit it, then we are reaffirming the religion upon which democracy is founded and freedom has a chance to claim the future. So said the Unitarian minister A. Powell Davies. It's who we are. We work for a world as we hope it will someday become, as we know in our hearts it is meant to be. Right here in this sanctuary, Sunday after Sunday, we cry, we rage, and we leave ready to engage. Many of our own social justice prophets are here this morning to speak with you. They have sign-up sheets for all kinds of good work in the world. Maybe just raise your hand if I name your name and you're here. Floretta Reed is here. Deanna Terrell is here. Sue Williams is here. Ross Elder is here. Barbara Sensentaffer is here. Jennifer Moreno is here. Lynn Budis is here. They may be in other services. I don't know. I'm not sure why, but did you notice that those names are all the names of women? Joe Nuri, are you here? He's upstairs. Carlos Moreno, are you here? He's somewhere in the building today. So it's true, I'm making a point about the women. It's true that this year we're celebrating 100 years since women got the right to vote. And it does seem that those who have been denied the vote value the right that much more. But we need everyone to get involved, this year especially. On a rainy January night last year, at a community dinner at one of our partner schools, a volunteer offered a mother with 4 children a ride home. The family had just stood in line for groceries, which we distribute thanks to our partnership with the food bank. And the kids, some quite small, were each holding bags of onions and potatoes, peanut butter, pasta, bread, and eggs. The mother refused the ride, perhaps from pride. Anyone who saw it won't forget what they saw that night. A mom and her 4 children walking down MLK Boulevard in the rain at night with plastic sacks of groceries swinging from their small hands. We will cry, we may rage, then we must engage. If only to save ourselves, because we stay human by being humane. We come closer to God by allowing our own hearts to be pierced by each other's suffering. The times, they are a-changin', and we want to be awake for the change, not asleep. Not asleep like Rip Van Winkle. The Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and we will celebrate his life and legacy next Sunday, loved to tell that story of Rip Van Winkle as a parable. He would remind us that what we remember is that Rip Van Winkle slept for 20 years. But what we forget about the story is what it says on the sign of the inn. When Rip Van Winkle goes up the mountain, the sign has a picture of King George III of England. When he comes down, 20 years later, the sign has a picture of George Washington on it. Upon his return to the world, when Rip Van Winkle looks up and sees the sign, he is amazed and completely lost. He doesn't know where he is, who he is. He had slept through a revolution. One of the great liabilities of life, King concludes, is that all too often people find themselves living amid a great period of social change, yet they fail to develop new social attitudes, new mental responses that the new situation demands. They end up sleeping through the revolution. Well, this is a new year, and I don't want to sleep through the revolution. And I think if you attend All Souls, it's because you share that feeling and intention with me. Come, writers and critics who prophesize with your pen, and keep your eyes wide. The chance won't come again. And don't speak too soon, for the wheel's still in spin, and there's no telling who that it's naming. For the loser now will be later to win. For the times, they are a-changin'. Let us not sleep through the changes. I love you. We're so happy you're visiting with us online today. We love connecting with people all across the country and around the world, sharing our powerful message of love beyond belief.
There's something new happening here. You can now join All Souls as a virtual member. Our virtual membership is designed for friends who live outside of Tulsa, Oklahoma, and who want to engage with All Souls in a meaningful way.
You can be part of an expanding family, a global family really, wherever you are. If you live in Oklahoma,
Ohio,
or Orange County, California,
Canada,
or Cameroon. By becoming a virtual member, you'll be able to deepen your connections with members and friends here in Tulsa and with members wherever you are.
Each week, you'll receive special All Souls content tailored for you, our virtual members. Virtual members have access to pastoral care, to personal prayers, and also receive invitations to exclusive web events.
You can learn more, and if you're ready, you can become a virtual member today by visiting allsoulschurch.org/virtual membership.
We're grateful our ministries are having a positive impact on your life, and we want to share the good news of love beyond belief with more and more people. So no matter what, we need your support to keep this ministry growing and thriving, so please consider making a gift today. You can do so by texting
Love BB for Love Beyond Belief to 73256, or simply visit our website. You are a blessing in our lives. May you be blessed
and be a blessing.